Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're going to talk about stress. So life is stressful. If you're joining this later, don't worry. I don't even know why I'm saying that, because obviously you're seeing this later and you know that you're not missing anything. But if ever you miss the beginning of these, don't worry, it's always recorded and you can always watch it at your leisure. And also go to our YouTube, Kara Yoga, and you can watch all the ones from the past on there. They all have the thumbnail that says Let's Chat. That's the dead giveaway, that it's about these Friday chats that we do. And I'm gonna keep doing these as long as there's stuff to chat about, which pretty much is always. But I always try and bring an element of health and wellness, yoga, life in there. So today I decided to do stress because I was thinking about this poor girl who's been missing, Gabrielle Petritito. All right, I gotta get her name right. She's from Long Island, from Northport, and she's missing. And there's this whole thing, Gabrielle Petitos. She was traveling with her boyfriend. They had this van, and they were living in Florida. Before that, apparently, they were engaged to be married, and they were living in Florida for a year before that with his family. And then they had this van, they went traveling across the country, and he came home without her. But this morning I was watching this video on the news about it, and they have the whole hour long, it's a little bit over an hour long video about when the police pulled them over in the desert. And they were arguing. So there was this public argument that happened in a parking lot somewhere or in a neighborhood somewhere. So people saw this big argument happening, and then they got into their van and they drove erratically down the highway or something, and the police pulled them over, I guess because they saw them driving erratically. So it reminded me, anyway, this whole hour-long thing, he gets out of the van, they separate them, and they're interviewing them separately, and he's got scratch marks all over him. And, he seems like a nice enough guy, right? But it reminds me of Clickbait, this big show on Netflix happening, where people don't get the full story about something, and they have so much to say, so much opinion, and they're basing it on not the full truth. So that's what concerns me about stories like this. And in previous videos, because they were videotaping this journey that they're on across the country, in previous videos, she shows him, she's getting out of the tent, and she's like, hi, good morning, we're camping here, blah, blah, blah. And she goes to him with the video, and there he is doing yoga on a yoga mat, stretching and stuff. And then when the police were talking to him, he seemed a little bit hyper, and they asked him about that, but not like totally hyper. When you get pulled over and there's a bunch of police there, how are you supposed to behave? I don't know, So she's sitting in a police car, they're talking to her separately, and he's telling them the story about how they were arguing. And it reminded me, David and I went traveling across the country. I was about Gabby's age. I was almost 22. And we got into an argument, and, it's very stressful when it's supposed to be this fun and frolicking sort of thing where you're taking photos and video footage and, capturing all these moments. Now for David and I, it was before all these things, it was like back to like a handheld camera time. So it was different, but it was very stressful because it was a time in our lives where we were around those ages where you're young, you don't really know what's going to happen in your life, you don't know what you're supposed to be doing in life, you're trying to find your direction. That alone is stressful. Now add into it, when you're traveling, maybe they were on a budget, and they were worried about finances, and Then you're talking about personalities in the mix of each other. You know, one person's tired and cranky and the other person is, you know, hyper and, you know, whatever it is, like things, not everybody gets along every single minute of every single day. And now you're together every single minute of every single day. And with all of that involved, you're having to make decisions about where you're going to go and what you're going to do and what you're going to eat and all that stuff, you know? So I guess my point is it's stressful. Life is stressful anyway. But here they had this, like, everything was, you know, more intense because they were with each other every second minute. Do I know what happened? No. Does anybody know what happened? No. Nobody knows what happened yet. We're waiting to see. But it just brought me back to that time when David and I were in a similar situation. And we were driving down in the desert or on the highway. The place was empty. There was nobody else on the road. And I was crying. I was upset. Something was going on between us. And we were pulled over by the police because I guess we were speeding. We were speeding. You know, and we weren't really thinking because we were in the middle of an argument and I was upset. So the police pull us over and their first concern was for me because I was a female. And so they asked me to step out of the car and speak to them separately. And they really were concerned and wanted to make sure that I was okay. Which made David really upset because I was crying and I was upset, but that doesn't mean that I was in the right, you know? We were arguing about stuff. We were both I'm not going to say at fault because I guess at fault is kind of the right way to say it about driving, speeding, and all that stuff. But it's interesting how in this society we tend to favor the crying female, you know what I mean? And I'm sure that that's right a large percentage of the time, and it needs to be noted, and a female needs to be taken care of in that situation. So I'm not saying that things were different in that way, but I know, speaking from experience, that I wasn't 100% right in that situation. So I could see why, you know, David might have been a little bit upset that, hey, you know, what about me kind of thing? Why are they only caring about her when really, you know, I'm upset here too, and I've been, you know, wronged by this argument that we're having too. Now, as a grown up, you know, an adult man, he can look back on that with this coming up in the news with Gabby and her boyfriend. He's like, you know what? They were right. They were right to do that. You know, looking back, to take care of the female in that situation and make sure that she was okay, because the percentage of females being, you know, abused and battered, and the male typically is the stronger of the two, right? So you do want to make sure that the more vulnerable person is okay. So now looking back, he's like, yeah, that makes sense. So what does that bring me to? Stress. We don't know what stress does to people. We know what it does to us, right? And how it can change us, our mind, our thinking, our perspective on things. You know, stress is like a major thing, you know, and it causes a lot of problems in our lives that we could actually take better care of and maybe perhaps avoid from happening. But as far as other people going through stressful situations and asking, like, could you do that if, you know, if he did kill her, could you see yourself getting to that point? Well, I don't know. You know, I don't know, but I do know that stress does crazy things to people. So these are the top 10 reasons that I came up with for having stress. We're going to talk about the top 10 reasons, and these are ones I came up with. I'm sure you have some too. And then we're going to talk about the top 10 stress-related illnesses that can be controlled by you. So can be stopped or can be helped in some way. And then top 10 ways that I decided to deal with stress, that we can deal with stress. And again, you might have your own list of things to deal with stress. So chime in if you have any ideas or anything that you'd like to say about anything that I just said. I'm just hoping I make some sense whatsoever. Okay, so top 10 reasons. Number 1, a feeling of no control or a loss of control. And I feel like that can umbrella a lot of the things that I'm gonna say after this. But a feeling of no control is like the number 1 thing that I thought of, right? And if you can relate to that, let me know. Does that make you stressed in your life when you feel like you have no control? Fear, number 2, in my opinion. So number 1, a feeling of no control. Number 2, a feeling of fear. 3, hunger. 4, if you're angry. 5, if you're feeling lonely. And 6, tired, right? These are all things that can bring stress into your life. Number 7, a self-inflicted schedule or self-inflicted goals or expectations that we put on ourselves, right? That we feel like we have to live up to. So we're going to give ourselves some stress with that if we don't reach those things in the time that we want to or in the ways that we want to. That's all self-inflicted stuff. Number 8, unforeseen circumstances, right? There's a lot of stuff that happens in our lives that we couldn't see that were going to happen, right? Financial losses or a loss of a loved one, divorces, there's tons of stuff that might be different. You could maybe see that coming, that happen out of nowhere, right? That can cause us some stress. Financial worries, that's a major one for a lot of people. And then number 10 for me, desire to know an outcome, right? So if something's happening in your life and you don't know what's gonna happen next, right? But you desperately wanna know what's gonna happen next. You feel like you can't settle, you can't get settled if you don't know what's gonna happen next, right? So that's a cause of stress. So when I looked at WebMD, these are the top health problems that are related to stress that you can fix. This is good stuff. Heart disease. I'm going to read through all this. Researchers have long suspected that the stressed out type A personality has a higher risk of high blood pressure, and heart problems. We don't know why exactly. Stress can directly increase heart rate and blood flow and causes the release of cholesterol and triglycerides into the bloodstream. It's also possible that stress is related to other problems and increased likelihood of smoking or obesity that indirectly increase the heart risks. Number 2 is asthma. Many studies have shown that stress can worsen asthma. Some evidence suggests that a parent's chronic stress might even increase the risk of developing asthma in their children. Whoa, that's crazy. Number 3, obesity. Excess fat in the belly seems to pose greater health risks than fat on the legs or hips. And unfortunately, that's just where people with high stress seem to store it. Number 4, diabetes. Stress can worsen diabetes in 2 ways. First, it increases the likelihood of bad behaviors, such as unhealthy eating and excessive drinking. Second, stress seems to raise the glucose levels of people with type 2 diabetes directly. Interesting, right? Number 5, headaches. Stress is considered one of the most common triggers for headaches, not just tension headaches, but migraines as well. So can you relate to any of that? Depression, number 6, and anxiety. Depression and anxiety go together. So it's probably no surprise that chronic stress is connected with higher rates of depression and anxiety. One survey of recent studies found that people who had stress related to their jobs, like demanding work with fewer rewards, had an 80% higher risk of developing depression within a few years than people with lower stress. Number 7, gastrointestinal problems. Here's one thing that stress doesn't do. It doesn't cause ulcers. However, it can make them worse. Stress is also a common factor in many other GI conditions, such as chronic heartburn, GERD, irritable bowel syndrome. Number 8, Alzheimer's disease. One animal study found that stress might worsen Alzheimer's disease, causing its brain lesions to form more quickly. Some researchers speculate that reducing stress has the potential to slow down the progression of the disease. Wow. I'm going to put this link underneath this chat on the YouTube channel, Carry Yoga. So check that out. Number 9, accelerated aging. There's actually evidence that stress can affect how you age. One study compared the DNA of mothers who were under high stress. They were caring for a chronically ill child with women who were not. Researchers found that a particular region of the chromosomes showed the effects of accelerated aging. Stress seemed to accelerate aging about 9 to 17 additional years. Oh my God. Okay, number 10, premature death. A study looked at the health effects of stress by studying elderly caregivers looking after their spouses, people who are naturally under a great deal of stress. It found that caregivers had a 63% higher rate of death than people their age who were not caregivers. So those are the top 10 that WebMD.com is saying that you can fix. And it makes sense when you listen to that list, right? That those are things that you can avoid, or you can certainly help in some way if it's going on in your life. All right, so here's my top 10 ways, and stay around for number 10. It's gonna get nice and steamy in here. Ways to deal with stress. What I would really like is an honest discussion on ways that we as a population do deal with stress. For the most part, I mean, if we're really going to be honest, right? People smoke, people drink, people, these are like the unhealthy things, right? Smoking, drinking, gossiping. That's a big one. I think that's a big one. Talking negatively about a situation, right? And when you talk about a situation in a negative way, it's only going to exacerbate that situation and those feelings about that situation. So it just makes it worse. It grows the negativity. You know what I mean? If you feed the negativity, it's going to grow the negativity. It's like a negativity plant. You're going to feed it negativity, you're going to grow it. All right, so here's my top 10 ways to deal with stress. Take it or leave it. And if you deal with stress in ways that you feel like are being judged as unhealthy, give yourself a break. Give yourself a break. You're human, and we need to allow ourselves to be human also. That's just my opinion. And not beat ourselves up and not beat other people up. Now, having said that, if it's like a problem, like where you can't function without that thing or that negative thing, you can't even like live your life without it, then that's a sign that needs to be addressed in a different way. So, something to think about. Okay, are we ready? Top 10 ways to deal with stress. Number 1, exercise. Number 2, meditation. Number 3, breath work. Number 4, remove yourself from the situation. Can you do that? Remove yourself from the situation. Number 5, talk to someone. Number 6, music. Number 7, laughter. Always a good one for me. Hi, Chris. Number 8, human contact. So when I think of human contact, I think of like, you know, just that touch, that human touch, the hugs, the touching on the arm, a massage, right? Any kind of human touch like that. Now, for some people, I do acknowledge that some of that human contact can be a point of stress for people. They might not like to be touched, so I get that too. This is just my little list. Number 9, community. So ways to deal with stress. Number 9, community. So maybe you're a part of a group, a like-minded group or a club, or people that you meet with that you can kind of feel that camaraderie with, that helps support your way of thinking and being. So for me, of course, it's yoga. For some people, it might be church or other clubs and activities that you do with like-minded people. And number 10, this is my big one, and I think it's very important, sex. I said it. However you engage in sex, I think it's important. It's a good way to relieve stress. Okay, so that's the whole kit and caboodle today. I talked a little bit about what's happening with this poor girl that's missing, Gabby, and how that triggered these thoughts for me of stress. So watch the beginning of the video if you missed that. I talk a little bit about my experience with David at one point when we were traveling the country and a similar thing happened to us. And just how stressful it is to be in that kind of a situation, you know. And so none of us really know the full story yet of what's happened because the boyfriend's not talking. So just, you know, if we could as a society just kind of wait and see what the full story is before we all make these decisions on things based on the information that we're being allowed to see right now. And that just made me kind of think of stress in general and how we deal with it, the reasons why we have it, and then some health situations where we can actually help our bodies not be in those detrimental situations by using stress relief programs for ourselves. And then I went over that list that I came up with of my top 10 ways of de-stressing. If you have any questions, let me know. I hope you enjoyed today's chat, and let me know if there's anything that you'd like to chat about in the future, because that's what I'm here for on Fridays, 12:30, live chat. See you for the next one. Bye.